Silence can be so strange. We're not used to it anymore. 20 years ago, we were still writing letters to one another. Sometimes we wouldn't hear back for months. Now, we write an email in the morning and expect to hear back by the afternoon. Around the same time period, we called one another. You didn't know who was on the other line before you answered, and sometimes they couldn't leave a message. Today, we get sent a message instantly. We could even see the exact moment someone's read our message. Oh, look, message read 5 minutes ago. Why haven't they gotten back to me yet? Communication back then was a bit more slow, more analog. We live in a much different world today. See, our brains are highly adaptable, a quality known as neuroplasticity. Repeated behaviors in our brain can strengthen certain pathways. And if our behaviors consistently lean towards impatience due to the influence of technology, it can result in reshaping these pathways over time, making our impatience more of a default setting. Social media and other communication platforms often leverage dopamine-driven feedback loops. So anything like a text message, an email, a like or a comment on social media, scrolling through short-form videos, or any notification on your phone. These can release small amounts of dopamine, a neurotransmitter associated with pleasure, reward, and motivation. When we come to expect these quick hits of pleasure, it can make waiting for longer-term rewards feel much less appealing. Advancement in technology has literally rewired our brains, making us less patient and more demanding of the immediate. With all this change happening in our brains, we now feel the need to respond fast, to communicate quickly. We speak before we think, we use awful filler words, we answer a message when we don't want to, and sometimes we say things we just don't mean. It's almost as if we've lost the art of communication. And the answer, the solution to all these problems, is to embrace silence. But wait, silence? Isn't silence awkward? After all, we are social creatures. We're meant to communicate. We're meant to share ideas with one another. We're meant to be social. We communicate all day long. And so when something causes us to break this communication, we perceive it as being awkward. When we're sitting at dinner and no one's talking, suddenly it's awkward. Or if we don't hear from someone for a few hours or for a few days, we think something bad has happened. Or we're on the phone and we hear silence. Suddenly we think maybe they've hung up. Hello, hello, are you there? Can you hear me? Who does that? What if they're just thinking? In a famous Harvard study, people were asked to sit for 15 minutes in a room with nothing but their thoughts. Complete silence for 15 minutes. The only allowable option to break the silence was to press a button that would send a jolt of electricity throughout their body. Sit in silence or be electrocuted. Each participant had experienced the same shock prior to the start of the 15-minute timer, so they all knew exactly what it felt like, and even said they would pay money to avoid getting shocked again. Yet nearly 50% of the people said, and nearly 50% of the people pressed the button. They shocked themselves. Imagine that. Getting electrocuted versus sitting in silence for 15 minutes. Which would you choose? People are uncomfortable in silence. We look to break silence whenever we feel a void. Silence doesn't have to be awkward or painful. In fact, silence is the key to being a master communicator. Now I know that might seem like a little too simple of an idea. We should all know how to be silent, right? Well, it turns out that's not exactly the case. In 2019, I threw an event for my business in Greenwich, Connecticut. We had a DJ, We passed hors d'oeuvres, people were dancing, everyone was having a great time. The event was incredibly successful. There was a small charity component to the event, so I grabbed the microphone, I hopped on stage to thank everyone for attending. I had my friends record it for me on my phone so I could post it to social media later. When I finished the speech, which by the way was phenomenal, I ran to my phone, excited to watch it, excited to post it to social media. But when I played back the video, I heard something very embarrassing. I had said all these ridiculous filler words over and over again. Oh, I was mortified. Why was I doing this? We all do this. Sometimes we just don't realize it. What if instead of using a filler word, we just said nothing at all? For the past 4 years, I've dedicated much of my free time exploring this idea of silence. I've sought out answers to questions like, how can silence benefit our lives? How can silence benefit our communication and our relationships? What does silence even mean? To answer these questions, I interviewed dozens of experts, ranging from speech-language pathologists, neurologists, and even FBI hostage negotiators. In my interview with a speech-language pathologist with over 30 years of experience in her field, I learned so many fascinating things about speech and communication. One common theme that speech-language pathologists find is that people typically don't give their communication partner enough time to respond. They teach to make strong eye contact and to look your communication partner in the face, to pick up on cues when it's okay to start speaking again. Very simple techniques. But in today's modern age of communication, well, it's nearly impossible to do that over text, over an email, and it's even sometimes challenging to do over a phone call or a video call. A great amount of miscommunication happens via non-traditional methods, via modern methods, when emphasis on tone and facial expressions are entirely absent. Another thing that speech-language pathologists teach, another technique, is to imagine you're holding a talking ball. When you're done talking, you throw it to your communication partner, and you don't start speaking until they throw it back to you. Well, there is no internet talking ball. We don't have a cue on when the ball's been thrown back or when the ball's been dropped. Perhaps the most interesting thing I learned from speech-language pathology is that silence is learned, not innate. That means we're born being bad listeners. And if silence is learned, that means it's a skill, somewhat of its own language, something we need to practice and get better at. If we're always speaking, then we're not listening. Silence gives someone permission to say what they want. Silence gives someone permission to say what they want. Think about that. There's another really unique skill that utilizes silence in communication as an advantage. I interviewed an FBI hostage negotiator. I was curious to learn what communication techniques were used in such a tense environment where every word you said mattered. And sometimes the words you didn't say were even more important. In hostage negotiation, the primary objective is to make sure hostages are safe and to resolve the situation peacefully. Thus, effective communication is critical. But what kind of communication? A hostage taker has demands, and oftentimes it takes someone with incredibly strong willpower to just be quiet and let the person speak. Thus, silence is a critical component of hostage negotiation. We all know that silence is learned and not innate, and a hostage taker might reveal more information they initially hadn't intended on revealing during this silence. Silence can also show that the hostage negotiator is calm, patient, and in total control of their emotions, which can help de-escalate a tense situation. Silence gives the hostage negotiator complete control. Imagine for a second if you communicated like a hostage negotiator, where every word you said mattered, where perfectly timed silences gave you an advantage. You don't have to be a hostage negotiator to apply these skills to your own life. At the end of the day, people just want to be heard. Being silent and paying astute attention to what the other person is saying will allow you to use the information they give you to craft better responses. Listen, everyone, we're not robots. We're not meant to respond and communicate at the speed of light. Certainly not at the speed of modern communication, of modern technology. Communication is not a race. When used properly, silence gives us the power that we need to be better speakers, better listeners. It allows the ones closest to us to share their feelings. It allows us the ability to think about what we're going to say before we say something we don't mean. So the next time you feel yourself about to use an awful filler word, or the next time you find yourself feeling the pressure to respond to a message or an email, or the next time you find the urge to break an awkward silence, embrace the silence.